Is the Unstuck business, which is a part of the Unstuck movement. So on this platform, I love to bring people on to give testimonies of breakthrough for your business, for your life. So these are tools and testimonies to help you take yourself and take your business to the next level, to take your learning, especially today, to the next level. I want to shout out the sponsor of this platform, the Connected Leaders Academy, a group of over 300 amazing entrepreneurs, leaders, coaches, authors, speakers from all over the world. Check out connectedleadersacademy.com. Find Jose Escobar, the leader of the CLA, on Facebook and LinkedIn. Today, I have the incredible Dr. Linda Berberich, founder and chief learning architect of Linda B Learning, with a 30-year track record of designing learning experiences and technologies that revolutionize education. Her expertise helps tech leaders develop innovative learning products in record time. I am fascinated to be able to talk to you today. Linda, thank you so much for being a part of the Unstuck business.
Thank you, Rob, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. Absolutely.
Great to have you here. I love to ask great questions. Great questions bring great answers. Great answers bring incredible breakthrough in our life and in our business. And today, in the world we live in, we're so concerned about our data being stolen from us, being used unfairly against us. And I want to know from you personally, and dive deep into what you do, how do we take control of our data? How do we take that power back?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rob. And it really just starts with awareness. And I think, especially generations coming up now, we're becoming more and more aware of how much data that we're actually generating in our day-to-day activities with the devices that we're interacting with. But we don't necessarily question what's happening with that data, who owns that data, and does it necessarily need to be that way? Just because historically, this is how we started off of these data collection platforms. Is this the way it needs to be? And so there's aspects that are legislation related. There's aspects that are technology related. There's aspects that are educationally related. And I think that there's an entry point for everybody.
And talk to me about what it is specifically that you do and how do you play a role in all of this?
Yeah, so I'm very passionate about bringing technology to the masses and to helping demystify what's behind machine learning and artificial intelligence. And that comes in by thinking about it differently. Rather than just using an off-the-shelf tool, which may or may not be designed for your purposes, why can't you build your own tools that solve your own problems? And that's literally how I started. The very first application that I ever built on an Apple IIe with a 5 1/4 floppy in one hand, that was my operating system, and a 5 1/4 in the other hand, that was my program. On that, I created a little program that helped me memorize my lines because I was a theater student, and it was a problem I needed to solve for myself. I was bugging my mom, I was bugging my friends. And so I wrote a program that helped me memorize lines. It would give me feedback if I got the line incorrect. It would give me another opportunity to respond. But it started from this perspective of problem that I needed to solve for myself. Now, could I turn that into a commercial product? Maybe, but at that time, it was about solving my own problems. And that's when we get back to data. We can look at data that we have available to us now, and that's often very limited what we actually have access to. And even what we have access to isn't necessarily our own personal data, but rather an amalgam of data. And so what I try to help people do is to understand, first of all, is the problem you're trying to solve a group problem that relates to an amalgam or a population of data, or an individual problem that relates to my own personal past history and experiences? That's your starting off point for developing applications. And then from there, it's matching the technologies that will help you solve your problem, even if that means building it yourself.
Yeah, so you talked before we started here about us building our own AI apps that we can use just for ourselves to help our lives personally, on a personal level, help our lives run better. And obviously, you did this for yourself many years ago to help you remember your lines. How, this is just in my limited understanding of the vast information that you're talking about. How do we end up doing that for ourselves? What does that actually look like for us to create our own apps that personally help us improve our own lives?
It really does start off with, first of all, what is the problem you're trying to solve? So thinking of that. So I gave you an example of I had the problem of trying to solve for memorizing my own lines. It was a personal problem, but again, in retrospect, could I create that as a product and market it? Absolutely. There's lots of actors who need help learning their lines, and having an app that would help them do that, I could build an AI app today that could work towards that kind of tangible product. And I might just do that. We'll see. But what I'm also suggesting is that we're at a place with technology that almost anybody can do that. What we need to better understand is the underpinning. What data do we need to have access to? So in my particular case, I needed to have access to the particular plays, right? The scripts that I was writing, literally scripts, whether it was a Shakespearean play, whether it was some other play by a Canadian playwright, since I'm from Canada, and we did a lot of Canadian plays. So Michelle Tremblay, shout out there. So that was some data that I needed to actually create the program. But the part of the program that makes it predictive, the part that adds the intelligence, is usually your own personal data stream, usually something that has been either tracked on you historically over time, or a population, and you'll recognize this from like Netflix and recommender systems, a population that this is people like you. So on what aspect are they actually like you? That's very important relative to the problem you're trying to solve, right? And whether or not you can actually get access to the right kinds of data so that you can actually solve those problems. In some cases, access to data is easy. In other cases, it's not. And the question is, why don't I have access to my own data? I'm the one who's generating it.
Why don't we have access to our own data if we're the ones who are generating it?
This is a question. And this is a question that, again, for me, is one of legislature and one of just private industry, because typically systems that had been public information systems like libraries are open domain. But when we're talking about private companies, that's not the case. That's their intellectual property, even though your intellectual property is actually my intellectual property. My words, my photos, my videos, my voice, and all of the digitalization that is taken from that.
So for the average person, creating your own app that is helping you to improve a certain aspect of your life sounds daunting and out of reach and very confusing.
Right.
How does AI come into the fold and make that process so much easier for a lay person to be able to even start to understand that journey?
So, I mean, even today, if you wanted to, you could talk to your favorite engine, your favorite GPT engine, whichever one you prefer, Gemini, ChatGPT, Copilot, among many, many others, and ask it, create a curriculum to starting from where I am to help me explore this journey. And you'll literally be given a roadmap according to the current state of AI on how you should actually embrace that. So it literally has never been easier. Back when I first learned how to code my very first program, that was my brother's computer. I never took any kind of programming lessons. So I basically figured it out from a manual and what was available in the online help. It was before internet. So it wasn't like I could just Google it and find the answers. So we are way ahead. And further, we don't have to even, there's so many no code solutions now for building applications. You don't even need to know how to code. What you do need to understand, again, is the very underpinnings. And I think when you personalize by that, that actually helps to motivate your learning, and it helps you to determine what you don't already know, because you can get an ideal path from a chatbot, but then as you explore that, you will individualize and personalize for yourself. And that's where the real learning happens. And that's what developers think like anyway. That's how we learn.
Mm. Yeah, one thing I have noticed with any sort of AI, it's incredibly beneficial just to skip the brainstorming steps of moving forward in any process. It's been so helpful just to skip the hours potentially of brainstorming a topic just to get myself past that stage to really be functionally like putting things into place that I can use. And it's, clearly something that you can take to the nth degree in so many different directions. And we're talking about what you do with Linda B Learning. Talk about, like, with Linda B Learning, when you're walking people through this process, what does that look like for somebody who comes on board? Who would be somebody who'd want to come on board to work with you?
So I've had all kinds of different kind of clients, but basically what usually is in place is you have a group of subject matter experts who doesn't have a background necessarily in learning or how people learn, or developers. I've worked with tons and tons of developers, but they don't necessarily look at solving a problem or the human aspect of it even starting from the very basic, who is this technology supposed to serve? So right from the very beginning, I help them solidify what their vision actually is. So what problems are they trying to solve, and get very, very clear on what the vision is first. And again, there's multiple inputs that typically play into that. And if people are technically inclined, I teach them my data scraping ways, which is why I can do it so much quicker than most other people. I can take sources from transcripts of recordings, from Confluence pages, scraping a Slack channel, pull all of those data sets together, and very, very quickly collate findings, in addition to talking to people and interviewing people and looking at technologies and stacks and so forth. So that helps. So that machine learning aspect actually helps the discovery process for me. And I can teach that to teams as we do that. So they too can learn that skill the next time they have another project, or teach it to another team. Mm-hmm. From there, we go on and we build out a strategy of what it is that we actually want the final product to look like, a prototype, a functional prototype. And we don't just guess at that. We actually iteratively test it with representative end users as we're building it. We do it super quick. We do it within a week. Prototypes up, demonstrate the effectiveness based on our user experience as we've been doing the prototyping, present that to stakeholders. Stakeholders are wowed and amazed that we built this thing so quickly. And then we map out, okay, so if our end product is going to be this date, what needs to be in place? Start building towards what that minimal viable product is. That usually can take anywhere from 4 weeks to maybe 16 weeks. Map out that process. And from there, I start to fade back. And instead of what we learned in the rapid prototyping phase, we apply to the iterative phases of building out towards the MVP. So basically mine is, not only do I help you build that really cool learning product, I also teach you how I did it, so you can take that process and repeat it on other projects or with other teams. And even if it's not the identical kind of project, like in some cases I'll build chatbots. In other cases, I'm working specifically on platforms, working on a really cool one right now that actually helps researchers test the methodology in a digital environment for efficacy. So it's actually what they use in their research. And once they've demonstrated their efficacy, then they can actually deploy their program as a treatment to their populations through the platform as well. So it can be something as simple as, a stand-up in-person boot camp, if you will, or it can be something as elaborate as this platform that I was describing. My projects have been varied.
So when we're talking about helping people to Linda be learning, helping people to learn this process, are there certain elements that can be put into place that are repeatable over and over and over again? This process that you help people create, is there any part of that is where do you find people struggling the most in that area of that learning process? Where do people usually get stuck the most?
Oftentimes, so many people in learning and development have been put into these order taker kind of roles. So they're basically giving, here's the description, build this thing. So it just sort of circumvents all of, or assumes that other work and figuring out what the ideal solution had happened beforehand. In a lot of cases, it hasn't. And that's the problem. So it's like building a house without a foundation, and you end up building something that was according to spec, but if the spec was wrong, the deliverable is going to be off. And you also have this idea of the scope as you built out this thing, and then you finally show it to the stakeholders, and they look at it and go, oh, that wasn't what I imagined. I need you to fix this, this, and this. All of a sudden, the scope of your project has become bigger, and it takes longer, it costs more money. So not only does it save you money because it saves you time, it also allows you, again, to be able to repeat steps over and over again. So while every project is different, and I don't really take a templated approach, the process is the same, but what you will build will be very, very different. But it's a way of thinking. I describe it as a far transfer task as opposed to step 1, do this, step 2, do this. It's going to be different depending on what technologies you're building with, what problems you're trying to solve, who your target audience is, etc.
Yeah, in just doing what I do in coaching, the breakthrough strategies that I have found for either people or businesses to find the breakthroughs they need, the strategies are the same. The situation looks different.
Yeah.
The different, moving parts might all look like they don't connect. But if you implement the same strategies, you're going to get the breakthroughs that you're looking for. So it's just that process, right? The process and everything in life is so important. that process leads you to the big breakthroughs. But if you don't put that process and that system in place, it's really hard to get the ball rolling on a consistent basis and to really get the momentum you need.
Right.
How have you created that momentum for yourself in your own life and what you do? Where does that come from for yourself?
It's often cliche that people who are in learning space refer to themselves as lifelong learners, but that absolutely is the case for myself personally. I mean, I was that kid who would always finish, the assignment in school ahead of time. And so like, Linda, go teach that over to Johnny in the corner. He's having struggles with that. And so I would be the person who would go over and explain it to my peers and my fellow students. And I just love to learn things. I was just always very inquisitive and always very curious. And I found that a lot of people lose that over time because they get shut down. They don't get permission to be able to express their ideas or to be able to be inquisitive. And for me, I mean, that's where innovation comes from. It's from curiosity. But you don't stay curious if your curiosity is always squashed. And I think sometimes in our attempts to help people, do better in life, we sometimes also cage them in and squash them unnecessarily when, that curiosity could have been the thing that led to the next breakthrough.
Yeah, sometimes for a group to move forward, there's got to be some conformity so that people don't stand out, and it helps everything to move forward much smoother, but can definitely cripple you in certain ways. It's really, really true. And it seems like somebody who's such an advanced thinker as you are, you probably ran into that plenty of times. How did you find yourself in an environment where that was such a freedom?
I think when I started to realize that if you start just building the things, you can demonstrate your competency, you can demonstrate your success. And so that's what I've always sort of met most of my learners with, regardless of whether it's like a mentoring situation or it's my clients or, if I do student boot camps on a volunteer basis. It's really starting with their own curiosity, starting with what their areas of interest are, and giving people permission to explore the ideas that are of interest to them, meeting them there. I found that, just building things, that's what builds confidence. Like the more successes that you have, but you don't necessarily get interested or motivated if it's not a topic that is of interest to you individually. And I think that's where we actually sometimes do a disservice in education, is that we feel like there's this prescribed curriculum where maybe we could get to those same goals, but with a different route by starting from the interest point of the learner, right? So I'm very much a learner-centric kind of approach as well. And in order to do that, we were talking about boundaries and the kind of things that, you have to be able to conform. Well, who gets to decide what those boundaries are? And when does the actual individual get to decide for themselves, especially, to bring it back around, if they're developing a program that's to solve their own personal problem or their own personal issues, they should be able to design those parameters. And I think having that freedom to do that, like once you've actually done that and realize I can do that, like that's a way I can code, it gets really exciting. And then it opens up the possibilities. And that's what I hope to motivate more people to do. It's like, yeah, I can teach you about the technology. The technology is always going to change, but I can also teach you about how to think about the technology and how to build your own confidence and while you're building your competence in your ability to solve problems with technology. It's an amazing thing to be able to give to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as things just seem to speed up and get out of control. The fact that we could take the power back to ourselves and to really learn. I mean, you could learn so much about AI technology by using it for yourself and implementing it into your own life. That's the real place that learning happens. Okay, so I want to continue this conversation and find out more about what level up learning and that framework is all about. We're going to do that in 60 seconds.
Hi, my name is Jose Escobar, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Connected Leaders Academy. We're a growing tribe, a community of entrepreneurs all over the world, globally, all across the country, high performers, titans of industry. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow personally and professionally, scale your influence, develop your skill sets, move the needle in your business, more clients, more money, more profit, the bottom line, and of course, grow your circle and your network like never before, this is where you want to be. Join the Connected Leaders Academy today. We are scaling massively. We want to welcome you in. Check me out on Instagram and on Facebook, the @ JASCO25. We look forward to having you join us. Take care.
So, Linda, I feel like we've already touched on this, but I'd like to dive in more into it. The level up learning framework that you created. Can you dive a little bit further into that?
Yeah, we basically I've described it in terms of it's how I work when I work with clients, typically in a 4-month engagement. But again, that's very dependent on what kind of deliverable we're creating. But yeah, it's just basically me doing this do it with you kind of model. So instead of me coming in and just saying, hey, here's some best practices of how you code with platform XYZ and then good luck, or just giving you a final product, it's me working intentionally with you and your team to build out the actual product itself. Mm-hmm. So and I've applied it even in mentoring situations. And I always say this one is one of my favorites. It was when I did through a library system with a bunch of teenagers as a summer school program. And they were located in different countries. I gave them the opportunity to choose what area they wanted to focus their problem on. And the area they wanted to focus their problem on was actually online bullying in their online gaming platform. And this was in 2019. So we're talking 5 years ago now. But even back then, they worked with a chatbot model that I'd put together that was essentially a community moderator model, designed originally for a social platform that was, trying to enforce their community guidelines. So they took my chatbot as a rough framework. So they used my prototype. So instead of us having to go through the prototype problem, we still went through the stage of visioning. They decided what the problem was they were going to solve. We talked about the different ways we could go about decreasing bullying behavior, because that was what we were targeting. We wanted the bullying behavior to go down. We talked about different ways that we could accomplish that by using game mechanics, because we're working in an online gaming environment. And from there, we basically just modified a bot that I already had created. They took my prototype, ran with it, extended it to this online gaming platform, and built themselves a very useful community moderator that not only decreased the bullying behavior, it actually implemented and increased pro-social behavior such that they were finding connections offline outside of the gaming platform. They were actually making friends, which was a really cool outcome.
Exactly what we'd want technology to do, to what, we've been sold it's devised to do, is to bring us closer together and to make things better for us and not tear us apart. So that's really, really cool. And what a real functional, tangible way for that to happen.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So even though that wasn't a paying client, like how I typically would approach my level up learning framework, we followed exactly the same kind of steps to go from the vision to the strategy to the rapid prototype to their final product. What was really cool about that particular project, the oldest one in the group, and I should point out, this was a group of teenagers, 15 to 17 years old, working on the summer school project. The oldest one decided that he was going to take that particular project into his science fair and continue the work. So he actually continued that work. We kept in touch, and I was giving him some mentoring in terms of how we would build out as a science report and report it scientifically, how we would actually graph the data and represent it visually and so forth. And it was really cool. And I hope, fingers crossed, he would be in college right now, that he's built on that kind of technology and is continuing to build those kind of applications for himself now that he would be 22, 21. So exciting. I'm reminded I need to reach out to him. But yeah, it's just, once you get into the technology like that, it does create that curiosity that keeps you going. So that's what I think of as the hook, right? Is that I'd like to get people going. I just provide the framework. So it gives the people access, and it also builds that confidence that you can do it because I'm doing it with you.
Yeah. How do we get this implemented more into schools at a younger and younger age? Because that's what we would really need, right? We would really need these things to be implemented early on so that they are much more adopted, and it's not such a giant confusing thing. It's more of like I understand this at a fundamental level at a young age. How could that happen?
That's actually what I'm actively looking to do right now, is partnering with different groups and different organizations in terms of bringing this kind of literacy to younger grades, and to also just the empowerment aspect of it. So I'm actively looking to work with people who are working with the K-12 populations, primary, secondary age groups, because I think that there's specific things we can do at both levels. I know there's computer literacy guidelines out there, but more specifically around just how we go about teaching this, using this kind of a methodology, this do it with you kind of methodology. I've certainly been able to replicate it across a wide variety of settings, whether that's in corporate America, whether that's in classrooms, whether that's voluntary. The project that I was describing that through the library system, that one was done completely online. And certainly those are options and ways that we should be connecting with each other, because we can. And talk about inclusivity when you're working with people from different countries and having to navigate different time zones. Not only is that a very real adult problem preparing you for, your future work world, it also is a way for you to just learn about other cultures and people who are experiencing events in the world from a completely different location. And that's also very empowering. So there's all of these wonderful, the positive side of having, connectivity that we don't hear enough of. And it intentionally puts us in a way that we can interact and learn from each other because we're learning together and we're co-creating. I love that word, actually, co-creation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the best way to create. And, it goes against the old methodology of competition, right? Competition was the old way to do it. Collaboration is the way we really should be doing. Everybody rises up. The win-win scenarios are created. And I love the concept. I love what you're talking about, and I see this happening in like private schools and things like that. How does it come to like a public school kind of thing? I guess you said you were even working with a summer school program. So finding those nooks and crannies to get in and talk to kids and implement this into their lives. Because I know with me personally, just going back to whenever I was in junior high, learning how to type, if I wouldn't have learned how to type in junior high, I probably wouldn't have learned how to type in my 20s or 30s. I wouldn't have known how to do it as well. And I would have been clunky with it. So just a simple thing like that, learning that in a class in 7th grade gave me so much more computer literacy. And now with things moving so much quicker, like I would love for my son who's 9 to have that fundamental level of computer AI literacy, that he'd be able to implement this stuff into his life today, because it would carry with him as things get more complex. He would carry that with him anywhere he went, and he could use that in so many different ways. Like you were saying, he might be able to create his own app that is something that benefits him and improves his life, or it could be for a group setting. It's incredible, the potential, but getting that started on the ground floor in many different areas seems like a very daunting task, but very doable. How do you break that down into like small chunks and individual areas? Because I know with what you're doing, you're holding their hand, walking through that beginning process. You can't always be there for everybody. How do you grow beyond just you?
By doing the process with people. I liken it to an old Vidal Sassoon commercial where I tell 2 friends and they tell 2 friends, and so on and so on and so on. It literally does have that kind of ripple generative effect. So I tend to teach the teachers. I tend to teach the leaders, the folks who are going to be generative, and pass it on. So these kinds of, like I described a library systems program that I did. Anybody can do that at any library system. If you've been through a process with me, building a project with me, you know how to do it now. And that's literally, you can see on my LinkedIn profile, all the people I've mentored over the years who will tell you, this is how I changed my career and started doing this work, was because I worked on this project with Linda. And that's the point. So yes, I'm one person, but I'm one person who teaches other teachers. And if it were possible for me to build a digital twin that could do it like I can do it, I'm working on that. Don't worry. But, I'm also very concerned about the state of data privacy currently. So that's the other thing too, is there's something to be said about things that are uniquely human. And I don't want people to lose that. So, but in terms of getting it out there, I mean, think about all of the library programs. Think about all of the summer school. Like I just got my City of Kent summer school programs and that are offered. I was thinking, how cool would it be if they did an AI app program here? There's lots of people doing this work. I'm just saying, look at this area, think about this population, get it to the kids so that they can start building right away. Because I think that even the way that we think as an older generation relative to the younger kids that are coming up right now, we wouldn't need to teach them how to type. They've been typing since they were, able to hold a device. Right. And that's the way that we're going. It's not going to be about the input. The input is changing. It's not even just our speaking. It's not just where we're looking. We're going to be able to use more. They will be the ones who create what is the next input device as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. Does any of it alarm you? You know, you hear all kinds of different stuff about AI. It's alarming. It's amazing if it's alarming, and it seems like it's getting out of control. What are just general thoughts in that area of like the dangers compared to the positives? How do you see the future going?
I have been in this situation where I have written an algorithm that I thought, that has too much potential for harm. And I've scrapped projects. That said, that's not to say that someone independently on the other side of the world, or maybe even down the street, hasn't done exactly the same thing and decided to move forward with it. So my thought on it is as much as possible, literacy. Learn about the technology, learn how to think critically about it by getting your hands on it yourself. Because I think there's nothing more powerful than the scientific method of, proving to yourself that something happens when you do it. Because when people tell you something, but you've had hands-on experience that proves otherwise, you're going to be hard pressed to believe what they're telling you when you said, no, I've actually built that. I know that can happen. So I just encourage people, don't be scared of the technology, learn about it. And if there is something that's a concern, question those concerns. That's an opportunity for inquiry.
Yeah, embrace it, and learn how it works so you can use it for good. I think that's a great way of looking at it. This is really fascinating. I love what you're doing. It's very interesting. If people want to learn more about what you are doing, is the best way to find you at lindablearning.com.
Yep, that's my website. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. I do have a book that's coming out sometime this summer, hopefully, if I stay on track with that. And I'm always open to opportunities to talk to people. So yeah, I encourage people to reach out. Let's talk about your project.
I love it. Anything you want to leave the audience with before we sign off?
I think, just be data aware, be AI aware, but don't be afraid. So fear is an indicator for you to become more curious.
That is so good. Fear is an indicator for you to become more curious. That's a great quote. Linda, thank you so much for being a part of the Unstuck business. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Rob. Take care.